Hello and welcome to Roni Programs. Today we're just going to be doing a bit of refactoring on the code we've written so far, just to kind of clean things up, get things in a nice state. There are some small changes I'd like to make. Some are a little bit larger than others, but let's start kind of in order. So looking at the start screen, our very first screen when we play this game, I have been wondering about this pattern of using like a handle callback that just calls a prop that we've passed. I don't really expect the start screen to do much more than start the game. So I'm going to go ahead and just bypass this handler. I really don't think it's that necessary. I don't see us doing anything else on this screen in the future. So I'm going to just go ahead and pass that on start prop directly. We've got our test running on the side to make sure that we don't break anything as we make changes. But I think that's, it's nice to just kind of eliminate some of those lines, get this file looking a little more trim. So now we can go on to, I think that's all we can really do here for now. We can go on to the main menu. Kind of the same thing going on here. We have this handle A press that will start a new game. But remember that right now, this was like our very first, prototypical menu. So before I worry about, this function right here, I want to take a second to rebuild the main menu using the menu component we wrote for the new game kind of sequence. So we basically have one option right now, but let's call this, main menu options, and we have new game, and we're going to map that to, let's call it, option name. We're going to map that to an object. It is an object, right? Yes, it is an object. With an ID of option name, a label of option name, oops. And, oh, you know what? I take this back because we have to handle the selection. And so I don't think that mapping is the right idea here. I think we'd probably just want to pass options directly into the menu component. So let's go ahead and maybe just wrap this in a fragment for a second. Let's create a menu and let's pass it a list of options. So right now, the only option we have is the new game. So let's go ahead and create an option for this, label new game, and on select, that's just going to call the on new game method. We're probably not going to use this handle A press again because it's not really doing anything useful. When the user hits the A button on the new game item, I don't expect to change anything different about that. So let's do that for now. So I think this is going to fail our test because we have actually, no, it doesn't. Okay, so it's interesting. So, probably just because the new game is called twice, but that doesn't really matter because in our app, it's just setting the current view. So that kind of makes sense. But let's go ahead and remove the, wait, let's stop for 1 minute. This is a button, and our test assumes that there's going to be a button called new game. We're changing the functionality here. By using this menu, it's no longer a button, but it's going to be an option. So we should go into our test and search for where we're looking for this new game button. So here and here. And we're going to change that to be an option. Now our test will certainly fail. No, it doesn't because we've rendered our menu. I'm all over the place today. Let's make sure our test fails so that the code we wrote fulfills the acceptance criteria. Great. We no longer need this controller listener. We no longer need this handle A press or this import, and we no longer need this fragment. So let me just remove that. And now we've cleaned up our main menu to be super simple. I would like to sort of investigate whether or not we need this ID and maybe just make label a string. I'm still kind of thinking about that. Just because right now the ID isn't really serving us much use, and we're just kind of creating IDs for the sake of having them, so that the options are unique. but the labels could also represent a unique menu item. Regardless, let's go ahead and save that. We've got our main menu cleaned up a little bit. And so what happens when we move from the main menu? Well, that brings us to the new game. Before we go to the new game, I want to address another sort of small annoyance, which is this sort of, A to Z button mapping. So it's not clear, super clear from the tests why we're hitting the Z key here when the test says that, the A button is pressed, whatever. So let's go ahead and I want to create a test utils file, or maybe, yeah, test utils. And we're going to create an enum. And what is this enum going to be called? This is going to be called something like controller button key. Controller button key, does that kind of make sense? Let's start with the name for now. We can change the name as time goes by. But this is going to map buttons, so like for example the A button, to the keyboard key. So something like that. So A takes on the key Z. So in other words, when I hit the Z key on the keyboard, that's associating it with the controller button A. So we have this enum, and by the way, I'll explain a little later why I wanted to separate this into the test utils. I can even explain it real quick. It's because the user event is taking an interesting form for special characters like arrow down. So we need to distinguish this from something like arrow down, which is the key that will be received in the event handler. So just that small reason, but that's why I wanted to separate the test utils. So let's go ahead and replace these keyboard Z's with controller button key dot A. And now it's a little bit more clear in this test what's going on. You can see our tests haven't broken. We can do the same thing for down and up. So down is arrow down, and then up is arrow up, I think. That would make the most sense based on the other ones. We can stage at this point just in case we screw up. And let's see, user keyboard arrow down. We're not actually using arrow up yet, but it's good to have it just for when we want it. We probably use it in the menu test. Arrow down, let's save that. So just a small difference that I think goes a long way. It's now a lot clearer that, oh, I'm hitting the down button, the A button, down A. Yeah, to me this test reads a lot clearer. So there are other tests, for example, in the controller listener, where we are doing kind of the same thing. So let's call it, controller button key dot A, and we'll replace this with controller button key dot down. So refactoring our tests is important because our tests are giving us information about what the code should do, and it's important that the the actions in the test correspond with what's actually happening. I'm going to capitalize this because for consistency and to make it clear that it's a title, it's the A button. So cool. We have one more test file that uses key events, and that's the main menu test. So here we have ups and downs. So let's replace this with controller button key dot down. We can replace arrow ups with controller button key dot up, and controller we can replace Z with the A button. Awesome. Our tests are looking pretty good at this point. I like where we're going with this. Okay, let's see. So we moved through that pretty quickly. In the controller listener itself now, we still have this I don't like this switch statement. I don't think this is super elegant. And so I'm just trying to think about what would be a cleaner way to achieve this. Maybe instead of targeting the switch statement, let's just first focus on targeting the removal of these keys right here. As far as I know, the controller listener is the only place that needs to listen for actual key values besides the test. So we have that test utils and multiple tests use it, but this is the only file I can think of that would use, for example, the Z key, the arrow down key. So why don't we just create that enum right here? And we don't have to export it, so no one else needs to know about it. And this will be a similar thing, controller button key. And it's gonna basically be the same thing. A is gonna map to the Z key. Down is gonna map to arrow down, and up is gonna map to arrow up. So this is a super small change. It's almost, you could almost argue it's not worth doing because we're creating this enum to use it in one place. I still think this is cleaner, especially for things like the A key, right? So the arrow down on down press, yeah, like you could kind of figure that out. But I still maintain that this is a good refactor. When you come to the code, it's a lot clearer what this is doing. Let's go ahead and stage that. Our tests are all still passing. At this point, we can even jump into the, excuse me, we can even jump into the app and just kind of test things. So here we see for the first time our new game, our main menu using the new menu component. So I'm hitting up and down. We obviously don't go anywhere. We only have one option. I hit A to start a new game. Great. I see this prompt. Yep, I can still scroll through my menu here. I can pick a name. I can pick a rival's name. Yeah, so our refactor is going well so far. Our tests show that our code is still working. We've manually tested it. Let's think about what we could do next. So I want to make this episode a little bit shorter than the last few have been. So let me just kind of peek around here and see what we can do. So one small change we can make, I'm noticing, is that we're rendering a controller listener in the new game, but the new game shouldn't really have this responsibility, in my opinion. I think there should be a separate component for rendering a dialog message and letting us know when the dialog message is dismissed. So let's go ahead and let's think about this for a minute. I want to be careful here. Okay, so we're gonna take this in small chunks. So the first thing we're gonna do is define a new component for a dialogue. We might have other types of dialogues in the future, but for now, we'll just have a dialogue. Super simple. It's a function component, and let's make it a stub for a second. Great. Let's go back into the new game. And what do we want this API to look like? Well, we're passing a label. So this, we could think of this as just like, what's the message we want to show? And the dialogue component can sort of handle this, listening to key events, so that the new game sequence doesn't have to do that. So perhaps first things first, let's create a message prop. And we'll just make this a string. In fact, we might have to make this a, what did we call a label? A label. Oh no, yeah, the label is a string. Okay. I think I was confusing it with a menu could be like a React element or a React node, I think. But we're gonna allow a dialog to take a message, and we're just going to render that message. So let's go ahead and now use that dialog component. So here we're going to render a dialog with the message you guessed it, dialog messages, message index.label. And in fact, I'm even thinking, instead of explicitly passing a message prop, why don't we just pass it as a child? I think this would just be a little bit nicer to use. So I can do something like, let me just cut that out. I can just say, here's a dialog, and here's the message I want to show. I think that's just a little bit, kind of like the p tag we're doing here. And in fact, yeah, you can see how the refactor is like nearly identical there. We're just replacing the tag that's used. So let's go ahead and use our new dialog, make sure that all our tests are still passing. Indeed they are. Let's go ahead and stage those changes. Great, so now what we want to do is allow the dialog to take care of these controller events. So I'm going to jump in the dialog, and instead of rendering a fragment, I'm going to render a controller listener. Whoops. Aha, there we go. Which we have to import, of course. We have to import the GUI priority. And now what I'm going to do here is rename this to be something like onDismiss, so that we're letting us know that when the A button is pressed on a dialog, we're dismissing it. So we'll have an onDismiss callback. And onDismiss is just going to be a function that takes nothing and returns nothing. And so now this is what our dialog looks like. When the A button is pressed, we dismiss the dialog. The calling component is responsible for, figuring out what that looks like, but and it's rendering whatever we pass into it. So now here in the dialog, I can say onDismiss equals show next dialog message. This may fail our test because if we're calling show next dialog message twice, that might cause some things to screw up. So this might fail. Yep, so it fails, and that's okay. Let's go ahead and not render the controller listener, but render a fragment just to see if that gets our test to pass. Indeed they do. We don't need the controller listener anymore. There's also some imports we don't need. Awesome. So now we have a little bit, we have the new game component having a little bit less responsibility. It's just rendering a dialog and some menus. So let's see, perhaps the next thing I want to do is move some of the responsibility of like the whole like options and rendering, like all this kind of stuff. I want to move some of that out into a separate component, which we only need in the new game. But let's do this. The first thing I want to do is create, let's call it, the player, choose player name menu. And what is that going to do? Well, that's going to basically have some options right here. And it's going to render a menu based on those options. And when the name is selected, we're going to, so we don't have access to set player name and show dialog message. But what we can do is, provide a higher level API for this. So something like on player name select, or even maybe just like on select, which will take a name and return nothing. We can call on select from this component and allow the calling component to do whatever it needs to do. So here we can, we can do something like on select just calls on select. Actually, we need to do this because we're also providing a name as well. And let's even distinguish this a little bit more. Let's just make this explicit and call this on name select. I don't like that renaming symbols will like do weird things with object keys. I think I understand why they have to do it that way, but most times it's just another step for me, but that's fine. Okay, so at this point, we haven't actually used our player menu yet. Maybe the other thing we can do is pass in is visible. I'm trying to think about this. Should the menu know? The menu probably shouldn't have any like sense of like, do I need to render or not? We can allow the calling component to figure that out. So here, we're going to render the choose player name menu, and on name select, we're going to do handle player name select, which makes me think it's not that important, but just to be like perfectly explicit, on player name select, so that we can have the match between on player name select and handle player name select. Cool. So handle player name select is going to take a name, and now we can do the things we were doing before, where we set the player name and show the next dialog message. So let's go ahead and save and make sure that everything is still working. Awesome, things are still working. We don't need this player name options array anymore. So that's great. Everything's still passing, cool. We can do the same thing with the rival name menu. Again, we can see, because we're copying and pasting, it's possible that we can make further improvements, but we're just taking it one step at a time, moving the responsibility out of new game. So kind of the same thing going on here. We're gonna have a choose rival name menu on rival name select, and this is the list of rival name options, which will be Blue, Gary, and John. Awesome. And so now here we can render a choose rival name menu, and then on rival name select we can do handle rival name select, just like that. Let's go ahead and just create a new method here, handle rival name select, taking a name, and just because the order is player then rival, we'll switch that up. I'll make sure our tests still pass. We are cruising here. Maybe we can just take a second to clean this up as well. So let's have maybe a generic like choose name menu. On name select, takes a name, returns nothing. Cool. So what does this do? This is going to return a name with a list of, let's just call it name options. In fact, yeah, this is fine. This is fine. We'll take an array of names that we're allowing to be chosen from this name menu. And the name options, well, we're basically just going to be reusing this logic. So name options equals names, which we have to bring in here. Cool. Names.map. And then when we choose that name, we're going to call on name select. So basically just pulling the duplicate logic from each of these components into its own component, which we can reuse to make these components a lot smaller. So now the choose player name menu, we're just going to be rendering a choose name menu with the names being, there we go, that's always confusing. Red, Ash, Jack, just like that. And then on name select equals on player name select. Let's make sure that's still working. Oh, interesting. Let's, oh, we forgot to return. Yes, okay, cool. Great. We can do the same thing here using these names instead. And then this will be on rival name select. Okay, cool. So now we've got the duplicate logic out. Our choose rival name and choose player name menu is a lot simpler. If we even wanted at this point, if we really wanted to, we could pull, like, I'm starting to think this, like, having these two separate components is kind of redundant. And in fact, I'm going to make an executive decision here and do something like this. Oops. Handle rival name select. I'm going to say that we just don't need those components. We just don't need them. We have extracted a choose name menu, and this is still pretty clear as to what's going on. So I like this. Similar idea here. We'll take this out and just render the choose name menu directly. Choose or handle player name select. That's why we have tests to help us understand when we've screwed things up. Okay, great. So this is good. This is good. We've taken the responsibility out of, like, I guess one thing you could argue is, does the new game need to know about the list of player names? I mean, I think at this point, like, I think this is fine. Let's leave it as it is. Okay. So we know how to handle the name selections. Show next dialog message. Is there anything we can do here? Because this component is growing pretty big. We don't really have a sense of like a sequencing, like in order of like sequencing like menus and dialog messages. I still think that's going to take a little bit more thought. So let's say we're done for this component for now. We didn't do a heck of a lot, but we did move some of that responsibility out into like mapping names to options. Let's see if there's any other components that have quick wins for us. Here we have the menu. The menu component. There is something I do see here that we could fix up. So the menu has a lot of detail about how the cursor position is calculated, and I don't love that. So I'd like to, again, make a small change that will hopefully help simplify some of this a little bit. We're going to create a hook called use cursor. And this is going to, we're basically going to be handling some of the logic that the menu component is worrying about. So we're going to return cursor and what is this API? What should this API look like? So obviously the cursor is like the index of the item that we're currently looking at. And I guess you could do something like, so right now we're only handling down and up. So I wonder if we should, just do like on cursor down, on cursor up or something like that. So just call it move cursor down, move cursor up. Something simple like that. So what should move cursor down do? Well, that should just do what the menu's doing. So taking some of that responsibility out of the menu. So use cursor, actually now we know we need to have the number of options. So let's create like a number of options. Whoops. Parameter, and now use cursor knows how how many options are there to cycle through. And then move cursor up. Similarly, we have currently the responsibilities in the menu, but we can just go ahead and move it to this hook, take some of the burden off of the menu. Now we can start to slowly integrate this new hook. So the first thing we can do is we can do cursor, move cursor down equals use cursor. Awesome. And actually, now that I'm saying this out loud, I don't think we'll be able to do it slowly because we'll have two cursors, but then secondly, even if they were named differently, the states don't align because this is one state and then this is another state. So we're gonna have to go out on a limb and just use our new hook, call it directly, move cursor up, and we're staging so that if we screw up we can revert and figure out what we've done wrong. But looks like that worked pretty well. I guess the last thing we can do is maybe just clean this up a little bit. Having the intermediate variable isn't super helpful. Thinking about this one, it's not quite the same level of abstraction. Like maybe we could just pass the options directly and have the cursor use like a select item at cursor. Let's do that because I think that would be a nice API. So select option at cursor, and what is that going to do? Well, that's going to basically take the list of options at the current cursor position and call on select. So now this isn't taking the number of options, this is taking a list of menu options. This can be options.length, options.length. Passing options now. And finally, we can call the new API using select option at cursor. Okay, cool. I like this. And now we can maybe even clean this up a little more. On down press, move cursor down. On up press, move cursor up. Yeah, I'm glad we did that. Select option at cursor. Move cursor up. Let's save. Awesome. We don't need those anymore. So now our menu is looking a lot more trim by moving some of that custom cursor logic out. What else? We could even have like a little helper function. Something like is cursor at position. I think it can't hurt. It is putting a lot on the cursor, but like the cursor is sort of, like, I guess just thinking about its behavior, like it needs to know its position, it needs to know which item is selected already, like right here. So why don't we go ahead and create that one more API. Is cursor at position. Let's give this an index. And we can just return, cursor index. So super simple API. And now here, again, like it's a trivial comparison, but I think having the extra API is helpful. Just like in terms of like at a quick glance, we know exactly what this is doing. And we want to pull that from here. Oh, and check this. Because we don't even need to access the cursor directly anymore. So this was one benefit of creating this API right here. We don't care about the cursor state anymore. We can use the API provided by this hook to get information about it. Because we don't care about the cursor's position. We only care if this menu item is selected. So that was a good little, yeah, that was good. And let's just alphabetize for my OCD. Great. Okay, just taking another quick scan. I think this is looking a lot better. We already touched on the main menu. Just kind of maybe peeking around in the test. We might have some duplication in this test. So maybe, just thinking. Nah, but we kind of needed these tests to be a little bit different because this is, sort of multiple priorities kind of thing. Let's leave those separate. Just taking another peek around. We just did that. Yeah, probably the biggest beast we still have to tackle is this new game. I mean, we've got a state variable for each menu that's up, a state variable for each name, a state variable for the current dialogue that's being shown. So I would say moving forward, the new game sequence, by far the most complicated feature we have at this point in time, is going to need the most love to kind of get it up to a higher quality state where it's just not doing so much. But this is good. We've got a good bit of our code refactored. Everything's still working. We can do one more sanity check in the app. Kind of selecting a name, selecting a rival name. Okay. App is still working. Let's go ahead and commit this refactor. We'll call it given the code some TLC. Given the code some TLC. Let's commit that. Great, that's it for this episode. Thanks so much for watching. In the next episode, we'll do a little bit more feature work. I'm not sure what that's going to be yet, but stay tuned for that. And I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.